When I first met Ethan Corbin, he seemed like everything I'd been waiting for. Confident, ambitious, and full of plans that made life feel like an adventure waiting to happen. He talked about starting his own company, how he wanted to build something real, something that would outlast him. "I don't want to work for someone else's dream," he said once, his eyes shining under the streetlights. "I want to create my own." Back then, I believed him. I believed in us. We met at a small business conference in Denver. I was working in marketing, trying to climb my way up from endless corporate chaos. He was in logistics, charming, funny, the kind of man who always made the room lean toward him when he spoke. We started dating soon after, and within months, he moved into my apartment. At first, it felt perfect. We'd make dinner together, talk about our futures, and he'd sketch out ideas for his company, Corbin Transport Solutions. He wanted to create a more efficient freight management system, and honestly, his passion was contagious. So when he said he needed financial help to make it happen, I didn't even hesitate. It started small, $5,000 from my savings for his initial expenses. Then $12,000 more when he said the investors needed a co-signer to secure the business loan. "It's temporary," he said, holding my hands, his voice low and reassuring. "Once the business takes off, I'll pay everything back. You'll see, baby, we'll be unstoppable." I co-signed the loan, $80,000. It was my biggest financial commitment and the biggest mistake of my life. For a few months, things seemed fine. He was always at meetings or on calls, his laptop constantly open, spreadsheets and proposals everywhere. But something started to feel off. He'd come home late, sometimes smelling like alcohol, sometimes not come home at all. When I asked, he'd brush me off. "You wouldn't understand, babe. It's business stress." Then one morning, I woke up to silence. His side of the bed was empty, his clothes were gone, and his phone number had been disconnected. On the kitchen counter sat a note. "I'm sorry, I need some time to figure things out. Don't worry, it'll all make sense soon." That was it. At first, I thought he'd had some kind of breakdown. But 2 weeks later, the bank called. The first loan payment was overdue. I explained that Ethan was handling the business side, but they told me something that made my stomach twist. He'd removed his name from the contact list. The loan was entirely in mine. My signature, my obligation. That night, I pulled out all the paperwork we'd signed together. My hands shook as I scanned through the documents, and then I saw it. My name on forms I'd never signed. My initials on pages I'd never seen. The ink wasn't even identical. He'd forged parts of the application. I remember sitting there on the floor, surrounded by papers, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I felt stupid, violated, used. The next morning, I went to the police. They were sympathetic but cautious. "Financial fraud cases like this take time," the officer said, "especially when there's a personal relationship involved." I left feeling like I'd been slapped twice, once by him, once by the system. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I started tracking him myself. I had access to his old email. He'd once logged in on my laptop and never logged out. I combed through his messages and found clues. Invoices, fake business proposals, even messages from women. Turns out, I wasn't the only one he'd charmed. One name appeared often, Kendra Vale. She ran a boutique in Austin. I called the store, pretending to be a client, and when she answered, I recognized the voice instantly. She was the woman I'd once seen calling him late at night, the one he claimed was a supplier. I didn't accuse her right away. Instead, I said, "Hi, I'm looking for Ethan Corbin. He mentioned he was doing some business with you." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Oh, so you're another one. Another one." The words echoed in my head. We met that weekend at a cafe halfway between our cities. She was tall, striking, but her eyes looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from disappointment, not lack of sleep. Over coffee, she told me everything. Ethan had promised to invest in her boutique, taken $30,000, and disappeared. No trace, no contact. I thought maybe he was scammed too, she said. But then I saw pictures on social media. He's in Arizona now, with some other woman. I felt the world tilt under me. Arizona! That night, I packed a bag and drove 12 hours straight to Tucson. Every mile felt heavier than the last. I didn't even know what I'd do when I found him. I just knew I needed to look him in the eye. When I finally found the address, a beige rental house in a quiet suburban block, I almost didn't believe it. His car was parked in the driveway. My car, the one he'd borrowed months ago, was in the garage. I watched from across the street for an hour, heart hammering, until he stepped outside, laughing, holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. It was like watching a stranger wearing Ethan's skin. I didn't confront him then. Instead, I called the police. I told them about the forged loan, the fraud, the fake business. They told me they'd need proof, concrete, indisputable evidence. That's when I got serious. I waited until he left one afternoon, then approached the woman. Her name was Mara Denson. I introduced myself, said I was a former business associate of Ethan's. Her smile faltered instantly. "You mean Ryan?" My stomach dropped. He was using another name. When I told her who he really was, her face went pale. She let me inside, and together we went through his office. He wasn't careful. Maybe he thought his lies were too tangled to trace. But I found everything. Fake IDs, multiple driver's licenses, bank statements, a flash drive labeled business docs. We opened it on her computer, and there it was. Every detail of his scam. He'd used forged documents under my name to get not just one loan, but 3. He'd rerouted the funds through shell accounts tied to fake companies. There were spreadsheets, emails, and even voice memos bragging about how easy it was to make women believe in dreams. Mara was shaking. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Neither did I." But now I had proof. I took copies of everything, went straight to the police, and filed an official report. It took months of back and forth, interviews, statements, verifications, but once they pieced everything together, it became a clear case of identity theft and fraud. The day they arrested him, I was there. He looked shocked when he saw me walk into the courthouse lobby holding the folder of evidence. For a moment, the old charm flickered. "Anne, I can explain." "Don't bother," I said. "Explain it to the judge." Watching him get cuffed was surreal. Not satisfying, not joyful, just necessary, like taking out the trash after it's rotted for too long. The trial took nearly a year. His defense tried to argue that I'd consented to all the loans, that we were partners, that I'd benefited. But my documentation, the emails, the forged signatures, the financial trail, told a different story. I still remember the day I took the stand. My palms were sweaty, but my voice stayed steady. I told them everything, how he'd manipulated me, how I'd believed in him, how he'd turned my trust into a weapon. The prosecutor showed the jury the flash drive. Ethan kept shaking his head, muttering under his breath. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I felt something shift inside me. He looked at me across the courtroom, his expression half disbelief, half resentment. And for the first time, I didn't feel weak. He was sentenced to 8 years. I was cleared of all debt. A few days after the sentencing, I got a letter, official, embossed seal. The bank acknowledged the fraud, confirming that I was no longer responsible for the loan. I sat on my couch holding that letter, the sunlight spilling across it, and I started to cry. Not out of sadness, out of relief. It wasn't over, though. Healing never happens overnight. For months, I'd wake up expecting to see him beside me, or I'd hear a car outside and feel a jolt of panic. Trust became something fragile, like glass I didn't want to touch. But I wasn't broken, just rebuilding. A few months later, I received an invitation, a support group for financial abuse victims. I almost didn't go, but I walked in anyway and found faces that mirrored mine. People who'd loved too hard, trusted too much, lost everything, and somehow found the strength to start again. It's strange how justice doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it's quieter, a kind of peace that seeps in slowly, like dawn after a long night. I started volunteering at the group, helping others recognize the red flags I'd ignored, the rushed promises, the secrecy, the way people Ethan use love as collateral. Every time I shared my story, I felt lighter. One evening after a meeting, I stepped outside into the cool air. The sky was streaked with orange, the kind of sunset that makes you believe in second chances. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A familiar voice, weak, defeated. Anne, it's me, Ethan. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, he murmured. I messed up. I lost everything. For a long time, I listened to the sound of his breathing. I said, No, Ethan, you didn't lose everything. You gave it away. And I hung up. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the lights flicker across the city. I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about reclaiming me. He may have left me with debt, with scars, with fear, but I'd turned them into strength. I'd faced him in the open, told the truth, and walked away debt-free, guilt-free, and finally free of him. Some nights, I still think about the woman I was before, the one who believed every word he said, who thought love meant blind trust. I miss her sometimes, but I also know she had to fall for me to rise. And now, when I see couples walking hand in hand, I don't feel bitterness. I feel clarity. Love is not about believing someone's dream. It's about making sure they don't use yours as a down payment. You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.